A college graduation for every graduating demographic on a college campus except for white and Christian. A transgender first grade teacher decides to come out to his 6-year-olds. We've got more evidence that Common Core has failed miserably, and we're going to debut our new program, our new video program on the heroes of the West, starting with William Shakespeare, next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Every week, Katie and I cover those stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Greeting to our listener, all of our listeners, and if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud. As the fascists at Facebook and other places are beginning to crack down on conservative speech, our conservative speech in this show, we're going to need you to maybe start listening to the podcast. Who knows how long we'll be able to continue doing this. But if you do subscribe for the podcast, that way you'll at least never miss an episode. Make sure you stick around, because later in the show we'll be debuting a brand new series, Katie, which I know you worked on, I worked on, and Ben Jenkins, our animator, worked on. It's called Heroes of the West. We've got the great figures of Western culture who are under assault for being racists and bigots and homophobes. So what we're doing is creating 5-minute video animations to tell the stories of some of these Western heroes from the proper non-social justice perspectives. Our first one, as an homage to me, is William Shakespeare. We'll debut that first video on Shakespeare before the end of the day. Very exciting. Talk briefly about your experience in helping to craft the scripts of these.
Yeah, well, it's been a really interesting experience, because in schools today, we don't get educated about any of these great heroes of the West, the people who actually built up the West to be what it is today. And so getting to kind of dig into their biographies and learn a lot about their life and the hard work and things that they did, everyone's going to really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I also would say, here we are at the Dr. Duke Show, and for a lot of our viewers, we're primarily an education commentary show. But we are also, Katie and I, responsible in part for FreedomProject Academy, which is a complete online school, and these videos that we're going to show you are also going to be used in our school, and we're going to send them out there for teachers to be able to use in their classrooms as well. So it's very exciting. But on to our first story of the week. Speaking of what's the opposite of the traditional heroes of the West, we get social justice universities. And cultural achievement ceremonies, replacing graduation ceremonies, highlight underrepresented communities across campus. So we've got Virginia Tech University, which is offering 10 different cultural graduation scenarios. So white kids go to the big one, and everybody else can go to the big one, but then all non-white kids and all non-cisgenders get their own special cultural graduation that the university pays for, where you get cultural gifties. So as long as you're not white and heterosexual, you get to graduate multiple times. And if you happen to have a black mother, a white father, a gay uncle, and a transgender daughter, you can attend 14 or 15 of these and get all of the goodies that boring old white kids can't get. They're called cultural achievement ceremonies, 10 of them. Virginia Tech, we'll give you an example of one of them. The Virginia Tech Gesta Latina, a Hispanic Latino achievement ceremony, celebrates the accomplishments of Hispanic and Latino undergraduate and graduate students. Students receive a commemorative stole and enjoyed a reception with family, friends, faculty, and staff following the ceremony. So again, right, there's the big graduation. That word graduation is so Western, so it's so patriarchal. These are cultural celebrations. So you get to go to them, and then you get extra, and the university is paying for these goodies. Again, as long as you're not a typical white kid, you can graduate from multiple organizations and get multiple gifts for doing it.
Yeah, okay, so I took a breakdown of all of the 10 that they offer. And what can happen is it actually happened before the big one, and it was purposeful. So it happened on 2 days, on a Wednesday and a Thursday, and I looked at all the different times. And according to the university, graduating students who wish to participate, they had to register for this event, but they may register for as many events as you would like. So there are 10 events, some of them overlap and some of them don't. So if you really, really wanted to, you could register for all 10 of them and go to all 10, and then at every one of them, except for international, they didn't list any prize goodies for them, but everyone else you can get cords or the commemorative stole, and you get to wear those at the big ceremony that weekend. So realistically, you could come out at the big ceremony, with every color of the rainbow, because of course for the
and
lavender ceremony, the LGBT,
what a statement!
You get a rainbow cord.
What a statement that mosaic would make.
And then you get the commemorative stole at various ones. So some of the other ones, the Aliyah, that's for Jewish students. You get a blue and white cord. Muslim, they get a stole. The Gesta Latina you mentioned. Lavender, they get the rainbow. International kids. Sorry.
What color for the Christian kids?
Wait. You know what? Christians not on there.
Not there.
Somehow
not
they missed
there.
there.
Somehow to include Christians is wrong. To include boring old white people is wrong. Cisgendered people is wrong. We celebrate them at the big graduation they get their diploma. That's where they get celebrated because apparently graduation is a white man's construct. So we got to have the cultural diversity graduations.
What's interesting, they actually have a ceremony for recovering students of recovery. So if they've been battling any sort of addictions, they get their own ceremony too, and they get purple cords because purple is for recovery. But that one is also that ceremony was going on at the same time as the veterans ceremony.
Oh my.
So in the veterans ceremony, which was kind of cool, they get a red, white, and blue cord, which I think that's pretty sweet. But after seeing all the Muslim, the lavender, the international, American Indian, and indigenous culture, donning of kente, all of these, I want to know where the short people, or as I say, vertically challenged, people ceremony is. Where are my left-handed people ceremonies? Because I'm left-handed. Where's because I'm a minority in that sense. Where's the Christian ceremony? There is no Christian. There is Muslim, but there's no Christian.
What I love is the fact that one of the participants in this, a student by the name of Yebsersa Bogali, I assume from Africa, expects a similar experience when she extends this year's donning of the kente ceremony for African students. Bogali said that attending the donning of the kente during her first year helped her acclimate to being at a predominantly white institution, right? And so weep for these kids that get to leave their native countries where there is recession and depression and disease and plague and come to racist American universities. They leave all of that first world civilization in the Central Africa behind. They come to the racist backwater that is Virginia, right? They suffer through having to go to school with white kids, but thank God they get a little taste of Africa to allow them to acclimate, because without that, however would these poor kids fit in?
I know. I think, the thing that's going to be interesting is now that they've highlighted that we have these 10 broken down, how many more can we create? Because now it's all about being unique. As they said, these ceremonies are really to celebrate that all of our students, their unique identities.
They're not.
Well, according to them, that's what they're celebrating.
Christians aren't unique. White kids aren't unique. I mean,
that's
seriously.
why maybe they're going to have more. Next year, we're going to see 22 different ceremonies. Mm-hmm. It's going to be great.
Well, maybe we could go all full on in this and go back to individuality like the founders wanted. What if we let everybody graduate and celebrate in their own way? What if we have instead of balkanizing this, what if we went back to a weird concept? What if we created one graduation for everybody in the name of unity? Everybody, where everybody got to go and everybody got to walk up on the stage and wear whatever they wanted and collect a diploma. How come nobody's ever thought of that?
You know what? I think you're onto something. It's a brilliant idea.
May want to. They're talking about segregation in the name of unity. What if we actually tried real unity and had everybody graduate together? Is that an idea that's ever been tried?
No, not.
Evidently not.
Apparently, I guess not. But we're gonna move on because we have another story that is really. Shocking, we already knew it was happening, but now there's research to back this up. It turns out that our children are particularly susceptible to the transgender ideology. So Katie Alcock is a psychology instructor at Lancaster University in Lancashire, England, and she recently gave a presentation on childhood gender identity, and then she wrote about it in an article for Medium. In this article and at the presentation, she said she's very interested in how children actually learn about sex and about stereotypes. How is it that children in their their little brains? How is it that they form these understandings? So she said she reads a lot of Twitter. All right.
Well, that's research, if anything, right?
Well, that is it helps her a lot. She said, and she very often she comes across statements that say. Talking about children who are trans and how they knew that they had a gender identity different than their biological sex. And these kids were 3 and 4 years old. Okay. So she's reading this on Twitter and she's like, ugh. So she does research and she discussed how research has been going on for decades about this. And it basically, the research tells you very telling consistencies that basically until about the age of 7, okay, until a kid gets to be about 7, they think in their brains that when someone's appearance changes, that their sex changes too. Kids
That's right.
are not able to actually formulate that in their brain until about 7 or even later.
That's why we tell them fairy tales.
Oh, geez, you and your fairy tales. All right, and this type of, if anything changes, it's not just like human beings changing. If anything kind of changes, if the appearance changes, the kids actually believe that things change.
In other words, if you put a suit and a hat on a dog, a 6-year-old's going to think it's a human being.
There you go.
That's the way it is. And you're doing a great job, Katie. I just have to say, do we really need research to demonstrate that toddlers do what you suggest they do? That if you put ideas in a little kid's head, I promise you this. If you started telling groups of 6 and 7-year-olds that black people were evil, they would start hating black people. I guarantee you. If you told 6 and 7-year-olds that the moon is made of green cheese, and every time you gave them a piece of cheese, you colored it green, they think they were eating the moon. So I'm glad she's doing this, Katie Alcock. I'm glad you're doing it, Katie. But what have we come to? Because you know this isn't going to convince anybody, right, Katie?
No,
you think there's a single transgender advocate who actually believes 4-year-olds can come out and become a different... You think this is going to change the mind of anybody?
No.
No.
But it does go to speak, because in the education department,
the education department.
The very first class, before you even get into the school of ed, and this happens at a lot of universities, the way it progresses, the first class you take is about child development. Mm-hmm. And you're supposed to be reading based on science and researchers, but you start reading the researchers who are educational researchers, and so they can skew their more qualitative studies than their actual studies that the science backs, supporting that kids until the age of 7 don't actually understand it. So that's already where you're starting to twist these future teachers into getting the students to believing who
when
they
you
are.
hear the word education professor and research, you have to realize that is an oxymoron, right? That it's not really what happens here. Education professors take real sciences and they, as you said, twist them, right? So you would think in a course on developmental childhood education, we would be concerned with brain chemistry, we would be concerned with not burdening young minds, really young minds, with things they can't handle, like abstract concepts like gender. But no, in the hands of educational professors, all that science goes out the window. All the good work that Katie Alcock is trying to do goes out the window, and we ignore their developmental inabilities, and we indoctrinate them at young ages. That's what happens in education departments.
Yeah, and then you have in the actual public school classrooms how you get teachers sharing about how, kindergarten teachers, first grade, second grade teachers, where these kids still aren't understanding this, pushing the transgender ideology, or in the case of a Wisconsin teacher in Madison, who is an elementary teacher of first graders. He
6-year-olds.
6-year-olds. He teaches 6-year-olds. He decided to make the transgenderism all about himself, because he decided, you know what? It's May. It's the end of the school year. It's time for me to come out to my first grade students as me being a transgender. And he said it was a big event. So on May 15th, the teacher, Mr. B, wrote on Facebook saying, "Tomorrow, I am out. Tomorrow," and of course use periods because don't understand English grammar. "All my students will know my truth, and they are the last to hear. This is terrifying and powerful. I teach in a school where some of our students have been taught by society that being transgender is wrong, that being gay is wrong, but I am still coming out." Okay, so that was on May 15th. Then on May 16th, the very next day, he posted an almost 8-minute video, okay? As I'm guessing part of his coming out to his students, because what he did is he read a book, and it was called They Call Me Mix, M-I-X. And basically what he did is he said that this little tale, They Call Me Mix, is his story in reverse, and we have a clip of that.
I am transgender. Maybe you know what that means. Maybe you don't. Maybe you've only heard those words through the filter of those who hate and fear. I'm going to read you a story, and maybe it will explain that word better. And maybe it'll explain me better. They Call Me Mix by Lords Revis. I love this story. This is really my story in reverse. Lords Revis starts as a girl, and they grow into who they're going to become. I started as a boy, and I hope to grow into who I'm going to become.
And the Wisconsin Family Council said that they verified that video, that 8-minute video, was shown to first graders without any parental notification. So what they did, the only way the Madison parents actually found out that this had happened, this indoctrination was happening in their child's classroom, is the kids came home to talk about it. Because what do 6-year-olds do? Mommy, here's what I learned at school today. And it was too late.
Please explain to me how a 6-year-old can process any of this. Goes back to what Mrs. Alcock basically had to remind us. You tell 6-year-olds anything, they're going to believe you. And so he says that that some of our students have been taught to believe by society. Where? What is your evidence for that? I defy you to show me a 6-year-old, who's coming to you about any gender issue. You're projecting your fears and your paranoia and your need to be recognized as a victim onto little kids, and it's disgusting.
And even later in that original Facebook post, he says, when I grew up, I did not have allies. We did not even know what that meant back then. And he's so proud of how we have allies now. And, he's trying to make it so it's all about him, clearly. And he's putting it clearly on top of all these poor innocent 6-year-olds who just want to learn their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. But now they have to, they can call me Mix. And at the end of the video, Mr. B discusses how he will not get mad at his students. He's going to hope that they try and use his new pronouns, which is they, them, and their. And his new name is going to be Mix Steele, because he announced that he's going to be taking his wife's last name of Steele. So it's MX Steele, Mix Steele.
You can call me Mix Steele, but really, don't worry if you don't get that and you forget and you call me Mr. B. You've known me a long time as that name. That's going to happen. All I ask is that you try to use the new name. And for my pronouns, I'm using they, them, and their.
It just shows you really how this is about, it's narcissistic. This is about using kids to validate me. And that's one thing to do it to high school kids who can kind of look you in the eye and roll their own eyes, or walk away from you. But when you're doing it to captive 6-year-olds, this is bad for everybody.
Now, just a quick reminder to everyone out there who's listening and or watching us, we're here because all of you are watching and liking our videos. So please continue to spread the word. Like the Dr. Duke Show, share it, comment. Let every one of your friends and enemies know that you are watching us. So we're here because of everything you've been able to do. And so far, we're still on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, but we'll see what happens.
As long as it lasts.
And another new addition, we're actually on Parler, which is basically Twitter, but without any of the censorship.
Yeah. We got to say a word about Parler, because next week we're going to have an interview with the CEO of Parler. We're going to have to get behind this guy if we want to continue to have our shows going. So look for that interview coming up in another Dr. Duke show shortly.
All right, well, if you're already on Parler, or maybe you're thinking about joining, please join now. And make sure you're following Freedom Project, Dr. Duke Pesta, and me, Katie Petrick. And don't forget the audio podcast makes for a great listen. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, and everywhere else. And give us that 5-star rating so we can move up in the rankings. So, on to the next story. We're going to go out to New York City public schools, because we talked about them last week, so let's talk about them again. We're being told, and the educators are being told, that you're supposed to favor black students over white students. This is a story coming from the New York Post, and they reported that during an implicit bias training for the New York City's public school educators, an emphasis was actually placed on focusing on black kids over white ones. Now, let's do a little understanding of the New York City public school system. So there's the Department of Education, which has a $25 billion budget, and as we talked about last week, is headed by Richard Carranza. Not a good guy. Now, the department hired as a consultant someone named Darnisa Amante. She's a lecturer for Harvard University Grad School of Education, but she's also CEO and founder of Disruptive Equity Education Project. It's called DEEP.
Yeah, disruptive education. Was there ever
Equity.
Not since Common Core has there been a stupid government program better named, right?
DEEP.
We are going to disrupt education. You got it, honey.
Education.
That's
okay.
Right.
Now, DEEP has been contracted by the department for $175,000, and they've already been paid over $54,000. Okay. Now, put that into perspective. Remember, Department of Education, $25 billion budget. They have budgeted 7.16 of that $25 billion in contractual services. So that all kind of lines in with that. And if you're upset that, they've already paid $175,000 for this one company, there's another group called Pacific Educational Group, which does the, quote, courageous conversations, and they've gotten $775,000 budgeted just for all this. So you have to think of what New York City schools are doing And then look at the specific instance.
And look at the specific instance. This Amante, who's running this organization, whose job it is to racialize the classroom and to single out white kids for scorn and racism and to promote particularly African American kids at the expense of other kids in elementary, middle, and high school. She said she gave the following quote to a room full of teachers. Quote, "If I had a poor white male student and I had a middle-class black boy, and it's interesting that she calls the black kid a boy and the white male a male. All right, is she white? Do we know? Because if she is, of course she's black. If I had a poor white male student and I had a middle-class black boy, I would actually put my equitable strategies and interventions into that middle-class black boy, because over the course of his lifetime, he will have less access and less opportunities than the poor white guy. So I'm going to take a middle-class black kid who has a stable family, who has supports, who has all sorts of advantages. I will preferentially treat him over the poor white kid who has none of those things in my class, because somewhere down the road, someone's going to look at that black boy and discriminate against him. Maybe you, honey, by calling him boy."
Well, you missed the very end of that quote, which is, that's what racial equity is. Mm-hmm. So now you all have the definition, teachers. Go out into your classrooms, look at your white kids, look at your black kids, and automatically look back at your black kids.
The definition of racial equity is inequity. The definition of racial equity to the progressive left is discrimination.
An appalled response came out of Mona Davids, who's the president of the New York City Parents Union. And she says, "It's completely absurd that they want to treat black students as victims and punish white students. That defeats the purpose of what bias awareness training should be. And for the purpose of saying this quote only in this context, it should be noted that Davids is also black." So she's coming out and saying how absurd this is to treat black students as victims and punishing white students. But Will Mantle, the Department of Education spokesman, says, "Anti-bias and equity trainings are about creating high expectations and improving outcomes for all of our students. These trainings are used across the country because they help kids, and out-of-context quotes and anonymous allegations just distract from this important work." So he's claiming that because he wasn't in the room, or someone specifically wasn't in the room, that the New York Post got this from other administrators in the room.
We have the quote. And the bottom line is that you do not have high expectations for all kids. You want to artificially hold down certain kids and on the basis of nothing that has anything to do with achievement, elevate other kids. It is what you said it is. It is what Amante said it is. The definition of racial justice is discrimination. That's there's no way around this.
Yeah, and if you think this is just like a one and done for some reason, that this one presentation is affecting it, no. The Department of Education in New York City, they have this mandatory anti-bias training for all their administrators, costing $23 million annually. Okay. One little anecdote that happened from something back in spring of 2018 was at the monthly superintendents meeting. So every month, superintendents get together, and they were asked, what lived experience inspires you as a leader to fight for equity? Now, a Jewish superintendent raised her hand, and she shared a story about her grandma experiencing how bombs were falling in Poland and how her family had to run from Nazis, and a grandfather who was in concentration camps. And her grandparents, she said, taught me to understand the dangers of targeted racism or the exclusion of any group and the importance of equity for all people. This is my core value as an educator. At the break then, because of how it's anti-bias training, but it's also, we're supposed to be in support of blacks, there was a superintendent, a black superintendent, who stood up in front of the colleagues and said, "This is not about being Jewish. It's about black and brown boys of color only. You better check yourself." This actually happened, and nothing was done about it, because these superintendents now are being, and I guess she's a black superintendent, how that affected her. But the fact that we are just narrowing everyone down into these specific groups, and we're supposed to educate children with this mindset?
This has never been about education.
Oh, of course not.
Let's drop the pretense. But the fact that as a black and brown child in Manhattan, you may not have immediate access to the latest high-quality Nike tennis shoes. Mm-hmm. We're going to equate that with bombs raining down on you because you're Jewish in Poland and being harassed by Nazis. And it's the Polish woman who's told to check yourself.
Check yourself.
There you go. Wow. Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
We have Portland State. We have a professor at Portland State University, and he wanted to create a graduate course because he wanted to, educate his students. And the course was supposed to be called Conservative Political Thought. Well, to get any new course, you have to propose it and go through the ringer and give, reasoning for its importance, why we need it. Well, Professor Bruce Gilley proposed this, and shockingly, he was denied getting to teach this course. He had to send it into the Graduate Council, and they said they did not like how he explained the answer he provided for how this course would represent a broad diversity of voices and be culturally responsive.
Yeah, whenever you see the words Portland and university in the opening sentence, you know this isn't going to end well. But again, what they're basically saying is that viewpoint diversity doesn't matter. That the fact is that these kids are not getting a diverse education. The books they are not reading, the courses they are taking, the social justice warriors who run those campuses are filtering everything through left-wing lenses. So in the name of genuine diversity, back when the word diversity used to actually mean what it says in the dictionary, that this professor, who may not even himself be conservative, we don't know. I would be surprised if he was at Portland State University. But this professor says, okay, let's play the diversity card here. Let's expose kids to economic ideas that are not Marxist ideas, that are not ideas of Keynesian economics, right? Let's do that.
And he said his exact answer was, this will enhance diversity of opinion, ideas, and political viewpoint offerings at PSU. Let's remember that this is for a graduate course, a political science graduate course. If those students at the graduate level cannot take and critically think through the differences in ideologies, they have absolutely no business being there.
Well, that's the thing. If you expose these graduate students to Adam Smith and to the whole wealth of serious economic thought that gave rise to freedom, to liberty, to free markets, right?
And political thought, all these
you
things.
expose them to that, they're not going to buy the facile socialist arguments, right?
Yeah.
Look, socialism as an economic policy has failed. Do you know how you know it's failed? That communist China was a third world country until it dawned on them that socialist economics doesn't work. They capitalized their economic system. They're the richest country in the world today, and yet they did it through capitalism. But if you explained all that and showed them that, instead of giving them simply Keynesian models, right, socialist models, then they wouldn't choose you. So diversity means never letting them have anything to study that challenges the status quo.
I mean, I know that he was going to be doomed from the title alone because he put the word conservative and political thought together. But I think the sentence within that answer that really doomed him was, by challenging the, quote, diversity perspective of group-based identity and victimization entitlement approaches to political community, it creates a more universal and inclusive citizenry. Whoopsie.
Surprised they didn't tar and feather the poor bastard with that.
Basically. So, needless to say, the council said his application answers, quote, did not support the university commitment to access and inclusion.
Well, moving forward, the ongoing victory lap. How many laps is this now, Katie, we've taken in the last 6 months?
It's like a marathon, man. So many laps.
The ongoing victory lap to prove that Common Core is as stupid and inefficient as we said it was, we're taking another lap now. We now know, according to a federally funded study, Common Core has sunk U.S. kids' test scores. This is from The Federalist and other publications as well. Researchers that the Obama administration funded to assist Common Core's rollout recently found, to their shocking surprise, that under Common Core, U.S. achievement has sunk. Not drifted, not sagged, has sunk. And sunk rhymes with thunk, right? The big collapse. Now, again, these are Obama-appointed researchers who helped roll out Common Core, so these are the truest of the true Obama believers, right? And they have now found, lo and behold, to their shock and dismay, that Common Core doesn't work.
I can't believe it myself.
Your first hint was it's not an education paradigm. Maybe if it had dawned on these true believers, these yes we canners, right? CC Poeters, if it had dawned on them that there's really nothing educational in the standards, it's all sociological education department speak, maybe it would have dawned on them that this wasn't going to work.
So the study is done by the Center on Standards, Alignment, Instruction, and Learning. They called it CSAIL.
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 See your education sail away.
And sink to the bottom. Titanic.
Come sail
Too soon.
away. Come
That's a great
sail
song.
away. I'm doing my best Eric Cartman. Come and sail away with me, your education.
Oh my God. Moving on. All right, so CSAIL, their study said, contrary to our expectation, we found that Common Core had significant negative effects on fourth graders' reading achievement during the 7 years after the adoption of the new standards, and had a significant negative effect on eighth graders' math achievement 7 years after adoption based on analysis of NAEP composite scores.
So in typical Obama administration fashion, that's about right. That's common. That's Obama era math. 7 years
common.
7 years to figure out a new program for educating kids that does not stress literacy and does not stress mathematical literacy, doesn't improve kids' grades. 7 years to figure that out in the Obama administration.
And actually, there's one more year of their research they're going to do, because taxpayers have been paying $10 million for all this studies to show all these great, and by great, I mean horrible results of what's happening with our kids. Now, according to the report, the thing that I noticed was that the report says more than 3/4, 76% of teachers surveyed, reported having changed at least half of their classroom instruction as a result of Common Core coming out. So when Common Core was unrolled and unveiled, and they said, oh, you can keep teaching the way it is, it's just standards, you're not teaching to the test, nothing has to change, it's just, we're just measuring what they're learning, it's going to stay the same or get better. Nope, about 76% of them changed at least half of their instruction. About 4 out of 5 math teachers, 82% of them, and 3 out of 4, so almost 3 out of 4 English teachers, 72%, reported having changed more than half of their instructional materials in response to it. So you're getting all of our teachers completely, or at least changing half of the curriculum of what they're doing just for Common Core, and 7 years later, shockingly, it's a failure. CSAIL
co-director Morgan Polikoff, a widely media-quoted Common Core, I remember this when we were arguing against Common Core, and they kept throwing quotes from Morgan Polikoff, right? He's a widely media-quoted Common Core proponent. He told Chalkbeat about the center's results, quote, that challenges in studying whether the Common Core worked are steep, right? It studied whether or not these challenges are as steep we think we are. I think, he said, that this question is more or less impossible to answer. After 7 years of evidence conducted by government officials of the Obama administration who helped put Common Core in place, who presented this education to Common Core proponent Morgan Polikoff, the response is, it's too difficult for us to conceive that Common Core would have failed, and we just can't say.
But we need to show my favorite quote coming out of Bill Gates' mouth. We have to show it.
Yes, we do.
It would be great if our education stuff worked, but that we won't know for probably a decade.
Bill, it's been 7, and now you know. You spent a lot of money to do nothing but make yourself feel better. You spent a lot of money to win lots of awards and to get lots of your new curriculum initiatives and your technology into all the Common Core schools. You spent a lot of money to make money on Common Core. It didn't take 10 years, Bill, to figure out that it's a disaster.
And on that depressing note, let's bring some positivity back into the show. So it's time, we're going to finally, drum roll, debut our brand new series, Heroes of the West, and we start with the one and only Mr. William Shakespeare. Let's take a look.
If someone asked you to combine literary, dramatic, and poetic achievement into the person of just one artist, that figure would surely be William Shakespeare. The influence of this mysterious playwright, poet, and expert student of human nature is quite unique in the history of human experience. Born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, England, Shakespeare had a good grammar school education that gave him the tools he needed to write his plays, including command of the English and Latin languages, and a familiarity with the great classical and Christian authors of history. In 1582, 18-year-old Shakespeare married 26-year-old Anne Hathaway. The couple had 3 children, Susanna in 1583, and twins Hamnet and Judith in 1585. 11-year-old Hamnet died of plague in 1596 and was buried in Stratford. By 1592, Shakespeare had made a name for himself on the London stage. His career as a writer, poet, and entrepreneur exploded. In the England of Queen Elizabeth I, the Elizabethan Age, writing successful plays did not necessarily make an author rich or famous, and many plays were never published by Elizabethan playwrights themselves. Rather, plays made money based on the sales of tickets. Shakespeare wisely became a shareholder in the Globe Theatre, which meant he made a percentage of every ticket sold. By 1594, Shakespeare's company of actors was sponsored by the powerful Lord Chamberlain, which guaranteed the actors security and protection. After the death of Queen Elizabeth in 1603, King James I of Scotland became King of England. and took Shakespeare's acting company under his personal protection, naming them the King's Men. The plays he wrote in the early 16th century, including Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest, earned him lasting fame and offered profound insights into human nature while showcasing his evolving genius as a poet. Somewhere around 1611, Shakespeare said his goodbyes to London, moving back home to Stratford. Despite his retired status, he collaborated on a few other plays before becoming ill with an unknown sickness in 1616. After writing his last will and testament in a very shaky hand, William Shakespeare died on or about his birthday, 23rd April, 1616. Shakespeare's impact on the English language was unforgettable. His achievement as a poet, immortal, and his work as a playwright, unparalleled. Today, English speakers across the globe repeat every day in casual conversation many of the words and phrases he invented, often without even realizing their origin. The very name Shakespeare has become a synonym for literary genius. If you have ever been told that love is blind, or you've found yourself in a pickle, then you are speaking Shakespeare. If you've been on a wild goose chase or been attacked by the green-eyed monster, or are as pure as the driven snow, you are speaking Shakespeare. Or if you've seen better days, or bidden someone good riddance, or felt the need to be cruel to be kind, or possessed a heart of gold, or tried to break the ice, or killed with kindness, or had too much of a good thing, then you are speaking Shakespeare. And if you find Shakespeare's language too difficult and simply walk away because it's all Greek to you, then you're speaking Shakespeare too. In fact, Shakespeare has been credited with inventing more than 1,700 common words, which adds up to more than 20,000 when parts of speech are compounded. But of all the words used or created by Shakespeare, none appears more than love. More than 2,200 times, Shakespeare invoked the word love. Today, Shakespeare is the best-selling fiction author of all time, with an estimated 4 billion copies sold. Hollywood has filmed his plays more than 500 times. Hamlet alone has been adapted for the big screen 79 times, and the famous To Be or Not to Be soliloquy translated into more than 75 languages. At his death in 1616, he left behind 38 plays, from comedies to tragedies to histories to romances, in addition to 4 poems and 154 sonnets. As his famous contemporary, the playwright Ben Jonson, wrote in a poem of praise, Shakespeare was not of an age, but for all time.
One of the ways we fix this is to tell the right stories. We spend a lot of time on the Dr. Duke Show telling you how the schools are getting it wrong. Well, we're also going to fight back by telling you how it's done right. This was done right. We're going to give kids an accurate view of Western culture, because if kids understand, despite its warts, the glory of Western culture and the freedoms and the liberties, they won't be so quick to reject it in college.
We have some extra credit to run through, so this week it's brought to you by Field Trip Etiquette. A principal of a Louisiana Catholic school learned real quick of what not to do while chaperoning a middle school field trip recently. Michael Camus has resigned his position as principal of Holy Family Catholic School after he was arrested at a strip club while chaperoning 7th and 8th graders on a Washington, D.C. trip. Take a moment to process that. According to the incident report, the now ex-principal was observed standing in the roadway, refusing to move, and was arrested for suspicion of public intoxication and possession of an open container of alcohol after refusing multiple requests to get out of the street. His resignation came via text just hours later, so he must have used his one phone call on something else. Now, this ex-principal reportedly was seen as a rising star locally and nationally after being named one of the 20 outstanding teachers honored by USA Today and received the prestigious Milken Education Award. Now, he'll just be raising his empty glass to ask for another.
Maybe like our friend in Wisconsin, maybe he just needs to come out to his entire group of 6-year-olds that he's an alcoholic, and that'll make it all right.
Another disgraced adult is adding to her list of woes after her class was canceled. Talia Levin went down in flames as the disgraced New Yorker fact-checker who called an ICE agent and a veteran a Nazi and a white supremacist because of a tattoo he had. But it turns out that tattoo was a symbol from his platoon in Afghanistan. Well, now her brief stint as a professor is ending since her journalism class on investigating the far right has been canceled at New York University. Based on her investigatory skills, she should have known how to get students interested in the class, but a mere 2 students had any interest in what she was providing. And that says it all.
One of the most radically liberal universities in the country, NYU, can't fill an anti-right-wing journalism course. Maybe there's hope.
We have an actual professor, unlike Levin, being claimed as a sexist business scholar for his daring to assign male authors in his classroom. The professor is anonymous, but fighting the daring fight is a 22-year-old female University of Utah student who wrote in a bias incident report to the university. I believe it to no longer be necessary when teaching the foundations of our country's economic system and those who helped build its ideals to be presented in conjunction with their sexist beliefs that they already have planted their roots within our global and local communities. Using logic and knowledge of foundational economists, the professor likely assigned readings by Adam Smith, Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, but it's unclear if she got the term invisible hand by Adam Smith confused with maybe something else.
We should erase their sexist economic policies, pretend it never happened, and institute socialist universities where students get to shut down their teachers. Kind of seems like it's already happened.
And finally, students and teachers are packing up the classroom as an Ohio middle school will be closed next year due to radioactive material being detected at the school. Zons Corner Middle School in Pike County will have its students split between an elementary and a high school next year after enriched uranium and neptunium-327 were detected in and around the site. 44 samples were collected from both the surface and air, with none of them being detected in the air. The school is located several miles from the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant, so it looks like Aaron Brockovich has a new case.
Oh, I get it now. That's what they mean by toxic masculinity.
And that's your extra credit for this week. Now, if you have any story suggestions, just type them down below in the comments section. And then do as the kids say and smash that like button and share the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the Dr. Duke Show audio podcast on iTunes and leave us that precious 5-star review, maybe a nice comment or two.
And that does it for us this week on the Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, please smash the video and audio podcast with your friends. Next week, we're going to be featuring our Presidential Minute series, a chance to look at another one of our educational series, starting with the man himself, Georgie Boy, George Washington. So please come back for that. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie and Baby, and we'll see you next time.